So how many of you all have ever seen a dog with 3 legs and wondered how it's gotten around, or moves? So one way that so a lot of dogs may require a prosthetic if they have an injury, whether it's been cancer or a direct impact from a car or something. But for this project, we're going to be showing you how to cast the dog's leg in order to make a prosthetic. So the objectives are for you all to understand the costs and implications for casting a leg and making a prosthetic for your dog. And you need to consider the age and the anatomy of the breed that you're making it for. The proper positioning, some safety considerations as you're making the cast for the prosthetic, and planning to make the final prosthetic with a prototype. So the materials you'll need are plastic wrap, some plaster wrap, a scalpel, plastic guides, can come tubing. You just want it to be flexible, just as long as you can use it. You're going to be cutting along that underneath the plastic or the cast. Some water and plastic wrap, and a Sharpie marker in order to draw the line. Alright, so first you're going to need your dog, and usually if your dog is comfortable with being groomed, it should be fine with this procedure. It'll take about 15 to 20 minutes, so usually a dog should be good with that time span, but if not, you may have to reconsider and be able to hold it on its side or have someone else restrain it for you. So the measurements, you're going to want to take some measurements before you cast it. You're going to want to measure from the last intact joint to the end of the stump, and then above and below that joint. You want to go to the other intact leg and measure those same measurements, except for instead of going to the end of the stump, you're going to go to the floor, and you're going to be taking those measurements into consideration when you're building the prosthetic. Alright, so the first step you're going to need to do is covering the leg. This is where you use your cling wrap, and you're going to wrap the portion of the leg at least an inch or two above where you actually want to wrap in plaster to the very bottom, and make sure that this is covered because this is a really important part of the leg that you get into the final cast. Next, you're going to tape your plastic guide on the anterior outer side of the front of the leg. Whether it's a front or back leg, it's okay. The reason for this is to be a guide for when you're cutting it with the scalpel. You don't want to be cutting through the cast into the dog's leg. And so this will allow you to cut along that top area. And the reason it's on the outer anterior portion of the leg is so that it doesn't impact the anatomical features that you want to save in the final cast. So for the casting, like I said earlier, you want to cast at least 1 inch below the plastic wrapping, and this prevents you from catching fur into the plaster, because the dog needs to be comfortable with you touching and moving its leg a lot, and if you wrap its fur into the leg or into the cast and rip its fur, it's not going to be comfortable with you doing that in the future when you're taking out and removing the future prosthetic. Also, you want to wrap it very compactly in order to catch all the details, and you want to smooth the plaster in order to work the plaster into the fibers in the cloth. After 5 to 8 minutes, you're going to want to cut off the cast, and you see this by feeling it's going to be a little wet, but not pliable. It'll be enough that you'll be able to cut it off without it being too rigid, and you want to be able to do this to be able to peel it off. So, and yeah, you want to cut it from the top to the bottom and take several tries because you want to cut all the way through. You don't want to cut straight down and get partially through and have to do it again. So take your time from the top to the bottom. And then lastly, you're going to use this cast in order to make the prosthetic. This allows you to be able to use the cast of the leg instead of needing to use the dog as a model constantly. Alright, so I drew out these pictures, a quick how-to guide, and I'm gonna, I think this should be enough. But if I could have some, I might get one person, if you all can help walk me through the process again, but we'll be doing it on the actual model. Probably it sounds good about it. Alright, so what's the first step?
Well, the first step is to gather your materials. You got that all okay. Alright, so now you're going to cover the leg with plastic wrap at least 1 inch higher than what you want to cast over the stump. But before you do that, make sure you measure.
Alright, so fortunately I don't have the measuring tape, but I do have plastic wrap, so if you could help me do this.
Okay.
And you can leave that down
Alright.
if anyone else wants to. Alright.
Alright, so you want me to go for it? Or you go for it? Okay.
So we can take off a little bit at a time.
Okay.
And since it's cling wrap, you just wrap it around and make sure it presses down the fur. There's not fur on there. But you want it to cover all the surfaces and push down any of the fur that would be there in order to get the anatomical features in. Alright, so that looks good. Didn't need too much, unless there's a... Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, that's all closed up.
Yeah. Alright, so what would I do next?
So now we need the
The plastic guide.
Plastic guide down the front, outside of the leg, and top, bottom, and middle so that it is secure.
Alright, so like I said, there are several sizes. You want something that's relatively flexible. This might be a little too rigid. It could work possibly, but it's got the ribbed sides that you would use to cut along. This is surgical tubing, that works as well, so we can use this. So if you want to hold it, and I'll take down the top to the bottom, and it'll be on the outer anterior quarter. So, up here. Middle, and one at the base. Alright, so what next?
Start wrapping the plaster around.
Since this is a little messy, I'm not going to actually do it because it's already putting stuff out, but like I mentioned earlier, you want to do it at least an inch or two below, and you're going to wrap from the top to the bottom with at least 2 layers, or at most 2 layers, because you don't want it to fall apart when you're building your prosthetic. Alright, so how long should I wait?
5 to 8 minutes.
6 to 9.
Oh.
Yeah, anywhere between that range, sorry. So then once this is cured, it's going to look like that. You're going to want to get your Sharpie marker and draw along where that plastic guide would be.
draw it right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's going to be right along the top of the guide. And you'll use that, cut along it, peel it off, and you'll have your cast for your prosthetic. Thank you.
No problem, I try.
So some options to consider when you're doing this. The cost could be really high. Like I mentioned earlier, the age is something to consider as well, and the breed anatomy. You can also build your own prosthetic, but it does take, you need to do it very carefully. You don't want to build it too big, too small. That's why we're making a cast. Like I said, age, it'll help the quality of life if it's an older dog, and the stability. So like I said, an older dog, it may cause its joints to deteriorate if it requires an amputation, whereas a younger dog, it really probably doesn't even affect them. So they can live a happy life without needing a prosthetic. And lastly, adopting a tripod dog or any dog is a rewarding experience. Doesn't matter if it has 3 legs or 4, at least it loves you and you only have 2.